Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're talking about brain biopsies for our pets.
Definitely a procedure that can bring up a lot of questions.
It really is. We're diving deep into this article by Dr. Nick D. Jeffrey, a veterinary neurology expert.
It's a fascinating article.
And it really gets into the why, the how, and even the why nots of using brain biopsies for diagnosis.
Yeah, and one of the things that it really highlights right off the bat is just how hard it is to diagnose anything going on in the brain.
Yeah.
The brain is well protected.
Oh, absolutely. It's tucked away in that skull.
Right, so even figuring out what's going on in there can be a real challenge for vets.
It really is like trying to solve a mystery, but you can't see the evidence, right?
Yeah.
It's in this black box.
Exactly. And so, we have to rely on kind of indirect clues a lot of the time.
So, like, what kind of clues are we talking about?
Well, a lot of it starts with what we call clinical signs. It's
Yeah.
just a fancy way of saying, what's the pet doing? What are the symptoms? Are they having seizures? Are they walking in circles? Have they stopped eating? Those kinds of things.
So you're looking for those behavioral changes that might be a signal that something's off.
Exactly. But the problem is those signs, those clinical signs, they can be caused by so many different things.
Sure.
And they don't always pinpoint the exact problem.
Right. Like, my cat could stop eating because he's stressed out.
Yeah.
Or it could be something way worse.
Right. It's like trying to diagnose a headache in a person.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be anything. And that's usually when we turn to imaging, things like CT scans and MRIs.
It's like getting a sneak peek inside, right?
Exactly. Those tools let us actually see inside the skull.
Which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. But even with these high-tech images, things aren't always clear-cut.
Yeah, I imagine there's still a lot of interpretation involved.
Oh, absolutely. And even the most experienced vets can look at the same image and come to different conclusions.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So how do you deal with that when even the experts might disagree?
Well, that's a key question.
And that's what we're diving into today. But we'll have to take a quick break and be back right after this.
Sounds good.
So before the break, we were talking about how even with these amazing imaging techniques, there's still room for interpretation.
There really is,
And sometimes vets might disagree on a diagnosis based on those images alone.
Right. And obviously an accurate diagnosis is so important when it comes to choosing the right treatment.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you don't want to be treating a tumor with antibiotics if it's actually an infection, or vice versa.
Exactly. The stakes are high. And that's actually one of the big takeaways from Dr. Jeffrey's article. He really drives this point home.
Yeah, he does. So that kind of begs the question, how accurate is imaging on its own? Like, if you're just looking at a CT scan or an MRI, are those foolproof?
Well, according to the article, imaging alone, it's got less than a 95% accuracy rate.
Less than 95%. I mean, that sounds pretty good, right?
It does sound pretty good.
But if you think about it.
But you're talking about a significant number of cases where it might not be enough.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. You're right. That's a little unnerving. So then what are the alternatives? Like, if you can't just rely on imaging, but you don't want to do a biopsy, what else is there?
Right. So there are other things that vets can do. For example, they can analyze cerebrospinal fluid.
Okay. And that's the fluid that surrounds the brain and the spinal cord. Right?
Exactly. And analyzing it can give us clues about what might be going on.
So they might be looking for, like, signs of infection or inflammation in that fluid.
Exactly. But when it comes to tumors, which unfortunately are quite common, the fluid analysis, it's not always reliable.
Really?
Yeah, those tumor cells are tricky. They don't always show up in the fluid.
Oh, wow. So it's not a foolproof method either. Are there other ways to kind of narrow down the possibilities?
Sometimes we can get clues from other parts of the body. For example, if a dog has a known fungal infection in the lungs, let's say, and then they start showing neurological symptoms, well, there's a chance that the infection has spread to the brain.
It's like putting together a puzzle, right? You're looking for any little clue that might fit into the bigger picture.
You got it. But even with all of those pieces, sometimes we're still missing that one crucial piece.
Right, and that's where the brain biopsy comes in.
Exactly, because it can give us that definitive answer. Is it an infection? Is it inflammation? Is it a tumor? And if it's a tumor, what kind is it?
Because that's going to dramatically change how you approach treatment.
Exactly.
So, speaking of brain biopsies, you mentioned earlier that there are different types. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. So the two main categories are open biopsies and image-guided biopsies.
Okay.
And open biopsies, those are done during surgery. So if surgery is already part of the plan.
Makes sense to do it all at once.
Right. But image-guided biopsies, those are minimally invasive.
Minimally invasive, so no cutting open the skull.
Right. We use imaging like CT or MRI to guide a needle to the suspicious area and take a small sample of tissue.
Wow, it's amazing how precise they can be with those needles these days. But I have to ask, even if it's minimally invasive, is it safe?
Well, any procedure that involves the brain is going to come with risks, right?
Oh, wait.
But the good news is serious complications from brain biopsies, they're actually pretty rare.
Okay, that's reassuring.
Yeah, in both human and veterinary medicine.
Okay, so it sounds like the benefits of getting a definitive diagnosis often outweigh those risks.
Right, and that's something Dr. Jeffrey really emphasizes in the article, the importance of that accurate diagnosis.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Even though brain biopsies are considered safe, they're not done as often in animals as they are in humans.
Interesting. Why not? You would think vets would be all over a tool that could give them such precise information.
Right. It's a pivotal question.
So what's the answer? Why aren't brain biopsies for pets more common?
Well, Dr. Jeffrey, he points to a few different factors. Cost is a big one.
Yeah, that's always a concern with specialized vet care.
Right, and veterinary neurology in general, it can be expensive.
Absolutely.
And adding the cost of a biopsy on top of everything else, it's just not feasible for a lot of pet owners.
Right, I can see that being a barrier for a lot of families.
Definitely. And then, of course, there's fear.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it is brain surgery. Even if it is minimally invasive, it's understandable to be nervous.
Exactly. And I think a lot of pet owners, they might be worried about the potential complications.
Yeah.
Or they might worry about their pet's quality of life after the procedure.
Which are all valid concerns. But surely those are things that vets can talk through with pet owners.
Right.
Explain the risks and benefits and help them make an informed decision.
Absolutely. Communication is key in these situations. But there's another factor that Dr. Jeffrey brings up,
Okay.
and it's a little more nuanced. Sometimes there's uncertainty about whether a biopsy will actually change the course of treatment.
Wait, what do you mean? I'm a little confused.
So in veterinary medicine, there's sometimes this assumption that if a pet has a brain lesion, especially a tumor, they'll likely be treated with radiation, regardless of the specific type of tumor.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of like saying, why bother with a biopsy if we're going to do the same treatment anyway?
Right. But, and this is Dr. Jeffrey's point, if we don't do biopsies and gather more information, we may be missing opportunities for more targeted treatments down the road.
So it's about more than just this one dog or this one cat. It's about gathering knowledge that can help all animals in the future.
Precisely. And that's why he advocates for more research in this area. He really believes that by better understanding these conditions, we can develop even better treatments.
That makes a lot of sense. But it sounds like we're at a bit of a crossroads then, right?
We are.
We have these incredible tools, but cost, fear, and even our own assumptions are sometimes preventing us from using them to their full potential.
That's a great way to put it. But there is some good news on the horizon.
Oh, good. I was hoping you were going to say that. So you said there was good news. Spill beans. What's changing? What's next for brain biopsies in animals?
Well, for one thing, 3D printing, it's really changing the game, making these procedures more accessible.
Okay, 3D printing. We hear about that everywhere these days, but you're telling me they can use it for brain biopsies in pets?
They can. It's incredible. They're actually using it to create custom guides for the biopsy needle.
What? So they're like printing a guide that's shaped to the individual dog or cat skull?
Exactly. It's totally custom fit. They take imaging data from a CT scan or an MRI.
Right.
And they use that to create a 3D model of the pet's skull. Then they can just 3D print this guide that fits perfectly and has a channel in it to guide the needle to the exact spot they need to biopsy.
Wow. So no more bulky frames, no more expensive infrared tracking systems?
Exactly.
That's pretty incredible.
It's a game changer when it comes to cost and accessibility.
Absolutely. This could make brain biopsies more routine, lead to earlier and more accurate diagnoses. That's amazing. But speaking of amazing, you mentioned something earlier called liquid biopsies. What in the world are those? That sounds pretty futuristic.
It does, doesn't it?
Like what Star Trek stuff?
Almost. It's still early days in terms of research, but it has huge potential.
Okay, but just break it down for me. What is a liquid biopsy exactly?
Basically, it's the idea that you could get all the information you need from a blood test rather than having to do a tissue biopsy of the brain.
Hold on. So no surgery, no big needles, anywhere near the brain, just a simple blood draw.
That's the hope.
Wow. But how is that even possible? How can a blood test tell you what's going on in the brain?
So they're looking for these specific things in the blood or sometimes in the cerebrospinal fluid too that can kind of signal what's happening.
Okay.
We call them biomarkers.
Lyovars.
They're like little messengers.
Okay.
It could be DNA, RNA, proteins, even tiny little vesicles released from cells.
So by analyzing those little messengers, you can tell if there's a problem in the brain.
Potentially, yes. We could potentially identify the type of tumor, how aggressive it is, even its genetic makeup.
And all of this from a blood test.
That's the idea.
It's mind-blowing.
It is.
Especially for those pets who might not be healthy enough to go through a traditional biopsy. It just gives me so much hope for the future of veterinary neurology.
Me too. And you know, it's important to remember that none of this incredible research would be possible without the information we've gained from those traditional brain biopsies.
Right. Every step, no matter how challenging, brings us closer to the goal of giving our pets the absolute best care possible.
Exactly.
That's a great note to end on.
It is.
So for all those pet owners out there who might be facing a scary neurological condition with their furry friend, what's the most important thing you want them to take away from today's deep dive?
I would say knowledge is power. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Absolutely.
Talk to your vet. Really understand the risks and benefits if a brain biopsy is being considered.
Because at the end of the day, it's about making those informed decisions together with your veterinarian that are the best interest of your pet. And who knows what incredible breakthroughs are just around the corner. Maybe someday, thanks to all this amazing research, brain biopsies will be just as routine and easy as a blood draw.
I hope so.
Me too. Well, on that hopeful note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into brain biopsies in veterinary medicine. From Vet NeuroJar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.